So it's Diwali. Clearly, I'm wearing my kurta, which is the festival of lights, victory over evil, right? Good over evil. And apparently, the one time of the year that every auntie and uncle wants to get in my business. Right. But all that aside, I love Diwali. The lights, the barfi, the mithai, the chaos. It's basically like a brown Christmas, but with more emotional drainage. But this year I'm going to do something a little bit different, right? I'm clearly wearing my kurta. I'm wearing my pride of being Indian, of being South Asian, of being Punjabi. But, what I really want to do differently this year for Diwali, especially this season of good over evil, wealth and prosperity and health, is I want to light these diyas, which I realize I don't have today. But I want to light my life up, not only for wealth or success, but for something even more important. And this might resonate with a lot of other brown, Indian, South Asian people who are celebrating Diwali this year. Peace. I want to light those diyas up for myself, for my own internal peace. Diwali is all about letting go of darkness, right? So I made a list, a rasta, of all the things that I am burning this year, right? Number one, people who act like they're better than everyone else when they're literally the bottom of the barrel, right? Like, babe, you're not with it. You're not enlightened. You are unemployed. Number two, I'm really going to be axing out and burning out the whitewashed brown people who think they're the main character because they think they're better than anyone else, right? If anyone is going to think that they're better than anyone else, it's going to be me. That's just like point blank, period. And that is really reserved for me, for people who are like me, for bitches that are like me. You're not the only bitch that discovered chai lattes in college. You're also not the only bitch that discovered the yoga studio down the block from you, right? You can go do yoga in your own peace of mind, in your own house with your yoga mat, which mine sits right across over there. Has not been touched, but it brings me joy that it's there. Also, number three is saying yes to everything. Plans, work, people, parents, family, particularly when the noggin is screaming out for help because it's full of anxiety. No, baby, I want to be laying on my sofa, my brand new sofa, a leather sofa. Shout out to Mathis Home. Shout out to Bernhardt. I don't want to be standing horizontal. Okay? Because honestly, who really even wants to work anymore? I mean, I don't. Every job description feels like a cry for help. You have to be passionate. You have to be flexible. You got to be willing to do the work of 3 people and only get 1 paycheck. I'm not passionate about that. I really am not. I rather nap. I rather go to the gym. I rather make these episodes. Even though I really clearly need a job and everyone needs a job to survive and live their best life, I still don't want to do it. And don't get me started on the coffee culture. I really want to axe these bitches who, are on TikTok, who are on Instagram, who are on YouTube. Sorry, shout out to my fellow content creators. They're like, have you guys checked out this fucking coffee shop? Have you guys gone to Costa Mesa coffee shop? Have you been to the Orange County Steam? Yeah. I'm sorry. I fucking love coffee. I love it with a immense sense of self. I know I love it. I have my pour over in my kitchen. I have my Nespresso machine. Don't get me started about that bitch because I know a lot of people are going to come for me for that one. I have my pot. I have instant coffee. I have all the shit that you need to make the good Java brew cup. I love coffee. Every time that I go to a coffee shop, it's always lackluster. I'd rather drink my coffee in my $5 Target cup and enjoy it rather than have a watered down bean water when you go to a cafe or you go to a coffee shop. It's really pissing. It really fucking grinds my gears. Let that truck pass. It really grinds my gears when you go to a cafe or you go to a coffee shop or a barista's place, and the drink is like $7 for a latte, or it's $4.50 for a drip coffee. Why the fuck is drip coffee $4.50? Okay, this Diwali season, I'm bringing light to axe those bitches out of here. Okay, don't even get me started when they turn the tablet over. When they turn the tablet over and ask for a tip. Hot topic, hot goss probably, but I don't get it. You're not even smiling half the time, Joanne. You know what? Actually, no, I can't say that. Bitches like Joanne, person number 5 in the comments, if you're Joanne, raise your hand. Joanne usually is a nicer person at a coffee place. It's usually like the Johns, the Alfredos, the Jameses, and all the dudes, the dude baristas that don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck. Okay. But really, back to what I was trying to say, which I realize I don't really know where I am at. Diwali at its core is all about light and truth, right? And clearly I'm speaking my truth. Clearly I'm talking shit because that is what I do. Everyone deserves bringing light to their life, right? However, not everyone deserves access to your light. Especially when, the people don't show up for you when you are the lowest in your life, right? That is one thing that I really want to make a call to action for the other South Asian, Indian, and brown people out there celebrating Diwali, celebrating any holiday during this auspicious time of the year, is really recognize who shows up for you when you're actually at your lowest. Right? Because those are the real friends, those are the real family members, and those are the real social support systems, which we're going to get into because I am going to be talking about some research articles that are very pertinent and relational to South Asian, to British Pakistani, to just any sort of brown group of gay and bisexual men who have sex with men, about their experiences about coming out, because I think it's really important to bring and raise awareness about papers that are out there and concepts that are out there that I kind of resonated with. But yeah, this year I'm not lighting my diyas for family and for everyone around me, but I'm really lighting it for myself. I'm lighting it for clarity, for boundaries, for being able to say no without guilt. I'm burning everything that is around me that dims me, that doesn't allow me to be my authentic self. Obviously that includes bad people, family expectations, and even some other text messages that I probably should delete by now because I don't have enough iCloud storage. Actually, fun fact, I just upgraded my iCloud storage. So this Diwali, let there be light. Not just for myself, but for the boundaries, for the joy, for everything around me, for my peace, right? Because the real victory of good over evil is that when you stop dimming your light to make other people comfortable, that means you've actually achieved something, right? You don't want to do that, right? You don't want to dim your light for other people to make them comfortable. And that is what South Asian people, that is what Indian people, they're so good at. They're so good at making themselves change themselves for the people who they consider to be their community, when you shouldn't be changing yourself to fit into a place. You should be your authentic self and know that being yourself is enough. I talk about that a lot, right? From the earliest episodes of my podcast, I've talked about being enough, and sometimes we don't get to be enough. But yes, let there be light. On this week's episode of Chiming River, we're going to obviously celebrate Diwali in my kurta. If you like my kurta, definitely drop a comment in the YouTube comments section about what you like about my kurta. Do you like the design? Do you like the color? Do you like the fit that I'm producing? I was trying to go for an Indian American outfit. And to me, when I think about an Indian American outfit, I think obviously American is baseball, American is LA Dodgers, American is all these things that we enjoy about wearing hats and wearing recognition about sports teams, even though I don't give a fuck about sports. I couldn't care less. I just love the color blue, so it really complements this outfit. And then obviously wearing my kurta to represent my Indian side, my Indianness, and really just affirm my identities, right? So grab your chai, grab your iced coffee, grab your water, because honestly, I need some right now. And we're gonna fucking get into it this week. We're gonna talk about expectations. We're going to talk about identity and coping based on some really fabulous papers that I was able to read, and I'm going to regurgitate it back to you because that is literally what my life is all about, is being a public health communicator, educator, content creator. And then we're going to talk a little bit about like what these things actually mean when it comes to Diwali, right? We celebrate Diwali for a variety of reasons, particularly across India, if you're, from different faiths and different backgrounds. But how that really transcends into every little part of our lives, right? And I think that's really important because at the end of the day, being able to talk about these things with family, with friends, and really recognize your Indianness with your queerness, with your LGBTQ-ness, with your gayness is really important, right? I think that's how we layer ourselves in our lives to actually have so much depth, so much appreciation of who we actually are. So yes, go grab your coffee. I was about to say go grab your cock. Go grab your coffee, go grab your chai, and let's get into it. I realize I don't really need my laptop that much. But we're actually going to talk a little bit about why we don't want to actually dim our lights, right? And, again, let there be light, let there be prosperity. That's a really core fundamental value in I'm going to move this a little bit up, in the, Diwali celebration. And, this episode is not to indoctrinate anybody into being like, oh my God, I got to celebrate Diwali. I got to learn a little bit about this. But I do believe that if we learn a little bit more about each other, we actually become better people, right? So one thing that I really always wanted to do and like actually talk a little bit more about was these perceptions of not dimming your light, right? Like being your authentic self and realizing that you have to be your authentic self for yourself, and everything after that comes forth, right? The more positive energy you're putting out, the more self-esteem, the more strength you're putting out, you actually have a better chance of being a better person. So I actually want to talk about this one study, which I thought was really, really interesting. And it has to do with perceptions of coming out among British Muslim gay men. Now, obviously, I'm not Muslim, I'm not British. However, the limited reach of papers that actually hit up South Asian groups of people is pretty scarce, right? So this paper is actually by Rusi Jaspal and Asifa Siraj, and it came out in, I believe, 2019 or so. And essentially, it was a paper, it was a study that looked at the perceptions of coming out in specific populations of individuals. And what they had done was essentially look at they interviewed people, right, in the UK who identified as Muslim or Pakistani, etc. And essentially, they found some really core things, which I think, in my opinion, are very relevant to, and I'm trying to find my page that I actually had was actually going to talk a little bit more about. They interviewed people about like what coming out actually meant to them. And I really wanted to talk about this because they found essentially like 4 or 5 big key points, right? One being that the social representational constraints on coming out as a source of shame and a threat to distinctiveness, the fear of physical violence from in-group members, so like within our own cultural groups, and then foreseeing the future, coming out as a coping strategy, right? So what was really interesting to me is in this study particularly, there was a comment from one of the participants, and it's qualitative, so it's basically like, interview type data, where they had asked, what is it about, being gay or being homosexual that is, pushing you to potentially not come out, right? And one individual here had mentioned, I just act straight, really. It's not too hard for me, actually. After a while, you start believing it yourself in a way, right? So again, thinking about how you actually represent yourself and thinking about what that actually means. But what really stood out to me was coming out a source of shame and a threat to distinctiveness, right? So they talked a lot about this thing called honor, right? I think in the Indian, South Asian cultures, again, we're more alike than we're different, even though people think that we always are super, super different. We actually have a lot of similarities, right? There's this concept of shame, there's this concept of honoring, almost this Asian expectations, which I think a lot of people actually can recognize and resonate with, particularly as Asian Americans across the Asian ethnicity groups, right? But having this honor and feeling like you have to, be really good for your family and be really good for your parents, for people, your loved ones, etc., right? So a lot of what these individuals are actually talking about were they weren't feeling like they were being seen, right? A lot of them had perceived and had family members and had social networks that actually thought that being gay was like a Western disease, right? And that I can tell you off the bat is very much my experience. I didn't think it was a disease at all, but I did think that Indian people couldn't be LGBTQ. And it really stemmed from this idea that I never saw people that looked like me, right? I never saw the representation of what it meant to be queer, bisexual, Indian, Punjabi, South Indian, South Asian, all these things, because the media never showed it to me. People never showed it to me. People were in secrecy, living their lives and not being able to amplify their own voices, right? So for me, when I read this, I actually kind of felt this visceral reaction of like, oh shit, like other people also felt that way. And I feel like a lot of the times this really stems from, again, representation. Representation matters 100%, and we can keep talking about it over and over again until we fucking die and hit the hammer and the nail. But it really is all about representation, feeling like you've been seen. So how does this tie into Diwali? You're like, what the fuck, Shane? Like, what is Diwali? How does Diwali play a role in this? Again, light over darkness, right? Feeling like you need to be amplified and put forth and honestly represented has such a positive light in your own life, right? And this is where the concepts of Diwali and good over evil and like really standing your ground and protecting your peace comes into play, right? Because another concept was fear of physical violence from in-group members, right? So fear of violence from your own families, from your own cultural groups, right? A lot of this, the concepts from the paper really resonated with me, right? And it's not because I feared violence from my own family. I would never say that actually. It was the concept though of seeing other people have those experiences and not being able to do anything about it, right? One individual here is, bringing shame on your family is a dangerous thing for Pakistanis or like Muslims in general, actually, right? And this is very common in South Asian culture. I mean, bringing shame, bringing this feeling of like disappointment is such a large aspect of our identities and also of the way we grow up, right? Things have to be perfect because we have to be perfect, right? We have to show ourselves and show our families that we are great human beings. But again, great human beings have tons of mistakes. Makes tons of mistakes. Great human beings act the way they're supposed to act and make mistakes and learn from them, right? Great human beings have character flaws, have flaws. And one of those things of a flaw has nothing to do with being gay or being LGBTQ. It has everything about your upbringing and the way that you navigate the world, the way you participate with people, the way you treat people. It has nothing to do with whom you love. Who do you love? But I also wanted to talk about, coping as, coming out as a short-term strategy, right? This is one of the themes of the paper, right? They basically found that a lot of the times people would reserve themselves from coming out as a short-term strategy because they knew that if they came out, there would be some negativeness with the whole scenario, right? In this culture, in this group of people. So it was really important for them to figure out these strategies of when to come out, how to come out, and when it was safe to come out. And this is just another representation. You should only come out when you feel ready to come out, right? And I think that's a really important concept, and that's something that I kind of resonate with. These, underlying theme of Diwali is good over evil and prosperity and like, prospering in your own true self, your true authentic self. You should feel empowered when you feel empowered, and you should do it when you actually are ready to do it. Nobody should force you, but only things that you can do is learn from people like us, learn from people who've had these experiences, and realize that sometimes the strategy is that you need to be true with yourself, but you need to do it in a manner that is obviously safe, and gives you the comfort, right? That doesn't threaten your livelihood or threaten your ability to do things. So that was one paper. Another paper that I thought was very interesting was another paper by Rusi Jaspal and Glynis M. Breakwell. And this was published actually in Psychology and Sexuality in 2022, and I'll put a little screen grab. But the paper was called Identity Resilience, Social Support, and Internalized Homonegativity in Gay Men. And again, this was a study done with about 333 gay men in the UK. Again, a lot of studies which have been published are often not in the United States because there aren't that many studies and that much maybe funding to actually do the research, and there's not a lot of queer people of color, especially South Asian researchers who might be doing this type of stuff, right? So I don't know. Anyway, shout out if anyone wants to give me some money to do a research study, because I love research and I love talking to people and I love being able to relay the information in a very interesting way. But what I really, want to honestly talk about is just their discussion part. They essentially looked at some survey data. They asked people questions about, identity resilience, outness, internalized homonegativity, so essentially internalized homophobia, and everyday discriminations. And what they really found that was important in this cohort of people who actually were predominantly a lot more South Asian, so more of a mix of Indian and Pakistani and different types of ethnicity groups there. They essentially found that community was such a large part of people being out, right? So this is really kind of going back to that previous study. Is like people didn't feel empowered to actually like be out and be proud because there was no community for them, right? There was nothing to see on one side of the screen or in social media or in media representation, people that looked like them, So community support was really important, right? Feeling like you were having that support was equally important of having strong identity resilience, right? So feeling strong about who you are was also an important factor that often led you to having more community support, right? Because people who actually were comfortable with themselves, right? So other South Asian queer people, gay men, bisexual men who were actually comfortable with themselves were able to seek support from their community because they were able to be themselves and also show others that they could be happy with whom they are, I thought that was really, really powerful because that is a super important part, right? Like being comfortable with your own self to be able to say, hey, I'm going to go to that gay bar or I'm going to go to that community event. I'm going to make some friends with those Indian people, with those Muslim people, with those other Pakistani, Afghani, Iranian guys, and actually make myself a community that serves my purpose and serves me and gives me peace, right? Again, another part of Diwali: peace, prosperity, health, and wellness. Another thing that I thought was really important was that there was this positive association between everyday discrimination and due to one's sexual orientation and extent of outness, which seemed counterintuitive, but it basically meant that people who were more out obviously experienced potentials for having a more everyday experiences of discrimination, right? However, coming out was a self-protection measure, meaning that it was a protective factor to be able to come out and actually increase your mental and psychosocial health, right? So even though like everyday discrimination is harmful, it actually was very associated with increased internalized homonegativity, right? But through outness as a coping strategy, gay men were able to achieve greater self-protection, meaning that even though they were discriminated against every day, they experienced potentials for internalized homonegativity, so feelings of like, oh my gosh, like gay people are, gay people are not deserving of respect, blah blah blah. But using their outness actually helped them protect their own well-being and mental health. So it was almost like this weird interlinked like relationship that